Hey there, it's Art Boy Suru, and over the past few months, I've been making a bunch of Game Jam games to improve as a developer and prepare for the Game Maker's Toolkit Game Jam. The reason I'm making this video is because the last game I made, which I named Serious Business, was supposed to be my submission for the Juniper Dev Game Jam, but it didn't actually get submitted due to a misunderstanding I had regarding the submission rules. So this video is basically the next best thing. Showing the game off properly, getting feedback, and talking about how the project actually came together. This video is also going to be more gameplay focused than a traditional devlog because I completely forgot to record most of the actual development while making these games. So instead of editor footage, I'm basically walking through how the systems work, what problems showed up, what I learned, and how each game evolved during the development. Like I said earlier, the biggest focus here is Serious Business, because that game became way more technically involved than I originally expected. And it helped me learn a lot of things, such as scene state saving, enemy satisfaction systems, timers, inventory management, RPG transitions, trait systems, and a lot of UI animation work. After that, I'll also go through Wonder Ink and Smiley the Jester, two other game games that I made, because both of those taught me different things about multiplayer systems, readability, animation handling, and player interaction. And a lot of what I learned from these jam games is already affecting how I'm approaching my currently developing major commercial game, Sapphire First Serve. So, without further ado, let's get into the video. For the Juniper Dev Game Jam, we needed to make the game very serious. And what's more serious than doing business? The act of trade between two people is a very tense and professional activity that requires great negotiation skills from both parties. Very serious indeed. Oh yeah, we also needed to add something that spins. So I added a clock because there's nothing more important than being on the clock, watching the hand spin and spin as you wait for the end of your shift. I also added an item wheel because, yeah, spinning item wheel. You get random items. Look, I know it's generic, but I was already short on time and it wasn't like I could go back and work on my original concept. Which, by the way, was actually a really cool idea where you play as a robot who spins gears that rotate the world around you, and you would have had to spin the world itself to create pathways to the goal. Honestly, I still think the idea was cool. But I started this project really late into the jam, so I had to pivot into something I could realistically finish. Anyway, Serious Business is basically two games connected together. You have the platformer side, running, jumping, avoiding enemies, and managing time. But then if an enemy touches you, the game pauses the platformer and switches into an RPG interaction. Instead of normal combat, the encounters are more social and weird. You can sell items, distract enemies, ignore them, use charm and joke actions, and more. And every choice either gains time or loses time. The entire game revolves around the timer. That was the core idea I wanted everything else to support. The platformer side was straightforward at first. Movement, jumping, animations, camera follow, enemy chasing. Then things got complicated once I needed the game to preserve the state of the level during RPG transitions. Because when the player comes back, everything needs to still be exactly where it was before. So the game had to remember player position, enemy positions, enemy states, which enemy triggered the encounter, and so many other little things you wouldn't even think about until you start testing the game. And your computer crashes. That system became the backbone of the whole project. And once that finally started working consistently, the game stopped feeling random and started feeling intentional. As for the enemies, there are three enemy types: Cone Kid, Applegal, and Placeholder Dude. And yes, Placeholder Dude is his actual name, because I really did not have much time to work on this. I'm pretty sure I started the project on day 4 of the jam. Each enemy behaves differently in both gameplay modes. Cone Kid can stun you with cones, Applegal fires projectiles if you try escaping above her, and Placeholder Dude mainly exists to pressure the player harder. Then once RPG mode starts, every enemy has different reactions, preferred items, and dialogue. I wanted the encounters to feel less like battles and more like awkward conversations with weird people. Unfortunately, I was not able to implement the direct player to NPC conversation mode I wanted to, due to time, but if the game gets enough attention, I just might add it along with some other cutout features. The RPG side probably took the most work overall. There's item wheels, trait systems, text box logic, action menus, hover animations, transition timing, and inventory exhaustion systems. The game has multiple item types and every enemy reacts differently depending on what you use. One of the biggest problems during the development was making sure the player could never soft lock themselves. So items needed failsafes, used up states, fallback actions, guaranteed progression options. A lot of the development eventually became less about adding new mechanics and more about making sure existing systems stopped breaking each other. This game had a lot of fix one thing and additionally break two other things moments. At one point, satisfying one enemy accidentally satisfied every duplicate of that enemy in the level. Another bug caused RPG transitions to return the player to completely broken positions, and physics kept trying to launch enemies into the air during collisions, which eventually forced me to redesign collisions so enemies could mostly phase through movement interactions while still triggering RPG encounters correctly. There was also a point where Unity itself froze during some scene state rewrites, which is always terrifying during a game jam because suddenly you stop thinking, how do I improve the game, and start thinking, please don't corrupt the project. Like I said before, a lot of this jam became build a system, break another system, repair both systems, repeat. Toward the end of development, the game finally started feeling cohesive. The transitions worked consistently, the UI timing started feeling responsive, the RPG mode had better animation feedback, and the timer pressure finally felt connected to the encounter system the way I originally imagined. The biggest thing this game taught me was how important communication between systems really is, because once multiple mechanics start interacting, small problems multiply fast. That's serious business for the Juniper Dev Game Jam. If you want to play the game, it's free on itch.io and playable directly in your browser. However, I should warn you that there are still some bugs I want to tune out eventually, so if you run into anything weird, definitely leave a comment below so I know what to fix when I get back to working on the game. Also, if you're enjoying the video so far, please subscribe and leave a like. I'm currently unemployed, so the support genuinely helps a lot right now. Thank you. Next up, we have Wondering. Before serious business, I was more focused on character interactions and co-op systems. That ended up becoming Wonder Inc. Wonder Inc. is a puzzle platformer about rescuing ink creatures from cages and using their abilities to progress through levels. The structure was simpler conceptually, but multiplayer and character management created completely different problems. There are 4 playable characters: Inky, Vinky, Rinky, and Yinky. Inky is black, Vinky is blue, Rinky is red, and Yinky is yellow. At the start of the level, only Inky is free. The others are trapped inside color-coded cages throughout the map. So the gameplay loop becomes explore the level, find keys, unlock cages, rescue teammates, and slowly build up your full party. Once characters are rescued, they become playable and activate their own trap systems throughout the level. This project got complicated really quickly once multiple characters entered the picture, because now I needed character switching, follow systems, multiplayer ownership, life systems, trap systems, respawning, and camera tracking for multiple active players. In single player, you can switch between rescued Inkies whenever you want. And if characters got left behind, you can call them over so they follow you. That feature became necessary really fast because manually dragging 4 separate characters across a level would have become annoying immediately. Then multiplayer introduced completely different problems. Additional controllers could claim different Inkies, which meant the game constantly needed to track who controlled which character, what happens when they die, what happens when they respawn, and how switching behaviors during all of that. Animation handling also became a major issue. The run animations used squash and stretch frames, which looked good visually, but caused collider problems during movement. Characters would dip into the floor, hover slightly, or flicker during movement transitions. At first, I kept trying to solve that through code, but eventually I realized the actual issue was mostly animation pivots and sprite setup. That project taught me a really important lesson. Sometimes the art pipeline causes gameplay problems, not the code. The trap systems were also a huge part of the game's identity. Different characters activated different environmental mechanics. Blue traps focused more on ice mechanics, red traps focused more on lasers, and every rescued character changed how the level behaved. I liked that because progression felt tied directly to the cast itself. Freeing characters wasn't just unlocking more players, it changed how the game world functioned. There were also a lot of prefab duplication problems during development. At one point, I accidentally modified shared character assets and basically created broken copies of multiple characters. This taught me very quickly to duplicate animated controllers and visual assets properly before editing them. The camera system also needed a surprising amount of work. If everybody moved together, the camera could look ahead naturally. But once players split apart, the camera needed to balance the whole team without becoming disorienting. And then there were the life systems. Every Inky has 3 lives shown through life dots. When they run out, they collapse into blob form and float back to either their cage or spawn point before respawning. I added that because I wanted failure to feel softer and more cartoony instead of instantly teleporting the player around. My main takeaway from Wonder Ink was it taught me a lot about organization and keeping systems modular once multiple characters are involved. The game is on itch.io as well and free to play on your browser. This game also is far from complete, so if you run into any bugs, let me know. Thank you. And finally, we have Smiley the Jester. Smiley the Jester was probably the simplest looking game here, considering it was the first ever jam game I made, but it still had a surprising number of interacting systems. The core mechanic is switching between Smiley and a flying Happy Cloud to rescue villagers and bring them to the Happy Kingdom. The gameplay loop is clear hazards, find villagers, switch to the cloud, pick them up, and carry them safely to the Happy Kingdom. Smiley handles platforming, jumping, and combat. The Happy Cloud handles flying, transportation, and rescuing villagers. There are also multiple cloud types throughout the game. Platform clouds, rain clouds, lightning clouds, mood drop clouds, and happy cloud variants. Mood drops were the main enemy type. If the player got close enough, they would start chasing the player around the level. Happy stars could destroy them and also convert certain clouds into safer versions, the happy clouds. One issue during development was enemy spawning. Mood drops originally spawned endlessly, which completely overwhelmed the game. So I needed systems to limit it. Enemy counts, respawn timing, and how many enemies could exist at once. That balancing process taught me a lot about pacing. Too few enemies made the levels feel empty, too many made rescuing villagers frustrating. The weather hazards also needed constant tweaking. Lightning had to feel threatening without becoming unfair, rain needed to pressure movement without constantly knocking players into pits, and platform clouds needed stable collisions so villagers didn't accidentally fall through everything. Animation problems also showed up again. Characters getting stuck in jumps, attack states refusing to end, fall animations flickering, input systems activating incorrect states. Eventually, I simplified a lot of the animator logic because overly complicated animation conditions kept fighting each other. That's honestly becoming a recurring lesson across all these projects. The more complicated animation logic becomes, the easier it is for everything to start breaking. The web build also introduced new issues. At one point, lightning effects worked perfectly inside Unity, but became invisible after export, which is basically peak game jam development. Everything works right until upload time. Main takeaway, this project taught me a lot about readability and keeping player intention clear even when multiple systems overlap. Because in a game like this, the player needs to immediately understand what's dangerous, what's safe, what can be interacted with, and where they're supposed to go. Looking back at these projects, I think the biggest thing I learned is how I personally approach development problems during game jams. Every game started with a relatively simple idea. Then most of the actual work became making systems communicate correctly, preventing soft locks, cleaning up transitions, and making mechanics understandable to the player. Serious business especially taught me a lot about state handling, UI timing, interaction systems, fail-safes, and layered mechanics. And all three games helped me improve workflows I'm already carrying into Sapphire First Surge. Things like cleaner animator structures, modular systems, player readability, separating gameplay logics properly, and designing around interaction clarity. And honestly, just getting more comfortable finishing games. Because game jams force you to stop endlessly redesigning ideas and actually ship something playable. If you want to support what I'm doing and help me become an official indie game developer, you can support me on Patreon, Instagram, and Extra.io. Once again, I'm unemployed, so any help is truly appreciated. And it will convince me if this whole indie game developer thing is truly meant for me. I'm still getting the hang of this whole YouTube thing, but I hope you enjoyed the video nonetheless. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. See you guys later. And as a reminder, all the links are in the description. See ya.